Let's do this. Stephen King's It is directed by Tommy Lee Wallace and stars Richard Thomas, John Ritter, Annette O'Toole, and Tim Curry as Pennywise the Clown. The town of Derry, Maine has been plagued with mysterious vanishings, grisly murders, and really just generally disturbed individuals. At its center is a force of fear and evil in the form of a clown who identifies himself as Pennywise. As a band of misfits join together, they learn that they have all encountered this entity in some form and set out to see if they can stop it. Boy, this one takes me back, and I'll bet there are more than a few of you guys who grew up with me in the 90s who will remember just how freaky this movie was for us back then. Now, I'll get into my personal feelings about the film here in just a minute, but for those of you who haven't seen it, let me just kind of tell you how this movie is made. Adapted from the Stephen King novel and originally released in 1990 as a two-part TV miniseries, the first half is largely told by giving an introduction of a character followed by a flashback that tells us of their childhood encounter with Pennywise. These flashbacks are told basically in chronological order, and the intention is to set us up for the second half, which is told entirely from the adult perspective. Okay, it's time for real childhood story time with Joe now. So someone recently asked me what movie was the movie that scared me and gave me nightmares as a kid. And while at the time I was watching movies like Alien and Fright Night, my earliest memories of being afraid are ultimately tied with it. I'm going to be completely honest, I was freaked out by this movie. I'm talking horrified. I had to be forced to go into the bathroom just to take a shower. All I could think about was getting into the bathtub or settling in for a poo and then looking down and seeing Tim Curry's face looking up at me. This thought still disturbs me. But as much as I may hold a very special place in my heart for this movie, I'm very aware that, I'm just going to say it, it's not altogether very good. I mean, there are some aspects of the film that work and are actually really creepy, but there is a lot here that warrants being critical over. Ask anyone who's a fan of this film and they're probably going to tell you the first part is really good and the second part's kinda eh. Now because of this, I am going to review each part individually. Now bear in mind, in this half there is going to be some minor spoilers, but I'm actually going to try to hold back as much as I can. I'm not going to say the same for the second part, but I'll at least try to be respectful for those of you who haven't seen this first half. So it's established from the onset that Pennywise is responsible in large part for the violent murders that involve children in Derry. We're given personal context with this through Bill's flashback, which is told first. His account tells us of the day his younger brother was killed by Pennywise, and this setup alone to the character is what had children like myself doomed to fears of clowns and storm drains. It is a very effective opening, with a chilling and admittedly iconic performance by Tim Curry, and he does do a great job of portraying this figure that children could be lured by, while also showing that he's clearly thriving on their fears, and he does a great job of maintaining that pace through the entirety of the first half. Systematically, we're introduced to the rest of what is later referred to as the Losers Club. How are they performed? Mostly pretty good, actually. This film can boast some very effective child performances that, in the end, make the journey worthwhile. Then there's the music, which is also very good in both establishing the character of Pennywise and setting the atmosphere for the rest of the film. And sure, there are one or two moments in the first half that get a little hokey with the score, but overall, in considering the time period, I think I can absolutely give props to the range of Richard Bellis' score here. And now for the downside. I mentioned earlier that the story is told in a series of flashbacks presented to us through each of the characters' adult counterparts, and it is here where we discover perhaps the first part's greatest flaw, which is that every time we are introduced to the adult version, the film screeches to a halt. Look, I get it. You want to set up these characters in the present so that when we get to the end of the second half, you can show us how much they've grown, right? The problem is, when we're getting to see this, we don't don't really care about this.
Eddie, where are you?
I'm in here, Ma. Oops.
I mean, they really should have just stuck with the kids. I mean, flashbacks are a tricky enough way to tell a story as it is, and you can do it right, like the TV show Lost, or you can do it very wrong, like this film.
I don't understand.
There's also a glaring flaw that I feel like most of you are already going to know before I say it, and that is this. Why doesn't it just kill the kids? I mean, that's what it does, isn't it? And I mean, I feel like you could try to argue that, oh, its goal is not just to consume, but to spread fear also. But the problem is that we cut away before we can even get an understanding of why it's doing what it's doing in the first place. Okay. And another problem that I've got with this film is that when you get to the final encounter with Pennywise at the end of the first part, and I mean just when our blood is starting to pump, they really let the air out of the whole thing right at the last moment. Stephen King's It is not rated, though a suggested rating would likely put this around a PG-13 for mature thematic material, violence, blood, some scary images, and some mild language. Like I said before, this movie used to scare the bejesus out of me when I was little, and when you hear people talk about how great it is now, I can't help but wonder if it's just been a while since they've seen it. In many ways, it is like a dark closet. When you're a kid, it can be the scariest thing you can think of, but when you're an adult, you just learn to see it for what it is. That being said, if you can overlook the plot holes and drags that this film has, the kids and Curry's performance will make up for it, and you can still manage to have a decent time with this one. I am giving part 1 of It a 2.5 out of 5.
Oh, come on, bucko.
Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. I will have my review for part 2 of It up for you very soon, but before that happens, what were your nightmare films as kids? Let me know in the comments below. You guys are great. Appreciate you again so much for tuning in. You're on Real Time with Joe. Is that you, my love? She didn't answer. I'm gonna die.